Hey everybody, hope you all are doing well this weekend, having a good Saturday. Thought I'd do a review and going to start on something different. What I've been doing is reviewing all the Kinks albums in order over the past, I don't know how long it's been, several months or year or whatever it's been. Got 2 albums to go and I don't have the next album up yet. I've got the last album. Kind of thought about just going ahead and doing that and coming back to the one that's coming up next, but done them in order this whole time, so I thought I'll just keep doing that, and when I get the other one, the next one up, I will do a review of that. But anyway, I wanted to, was thinking about, since I was getting to the end of the Kinks, maybe doing some other reviews of other groups' albums, or people, or groups' albums, and thought of a couple of groups that I want to do. One of them, if you saw a video I made the other day, you probably already know, is the Jam. I have a bunch of their albums, but I got a vinyl box set of all their studio albums the other day that I did a video doing sort of an unboxing. So I'm going to do the Jam also, just not right now. I'll get to them. The other band that I thought just kind of hit me out of the blue a while back, thought it'd be fun to do because they're a band that is everybody on the VC knows them. I'm willing to bet that everybody on the VC probably has at least 1 or 2 of their albums or 45s. If you don't, everybody knows their songs, and in their own way, there's, they had hits, they had sold a ton of records. They're every bit as known and big as anyone you can name: Beatles, Rolling Stones, Elvis, Led Zeppelin, whoever. But they, for all that, they don't get a whole lot of mention on the VC. I've seen some people, when they're just showing their record collections, they'll have an album or two by this band and show them. I've never really seen them talked about too much beyond that. I've seen maybe one review. I know that Joe, Mean Mr. Mayo, did a review of one of their albums, and I actually did a review of one of their albums last year or a year or so back. But just kind of hit me that for that reason, that there's this huge band, everyone knows their songs, and they don't get a lot of talk on the VC. And I think most people probably generally like them. They just, for whatever reason, don't get a lot of attention. So it would be fun to do their albums and review them, and keep you on the edge of your seat here for just a second. All right, the Beach Boys. Thought it'd be fun to go through all the Beach Boys albums one by one and review them. I don't know that I'm going to go completely all the way through every album they ever made up to the one that came out a year or so ago, because A, I don't have them, and B, I don't think the albums they put out in the 80s or 90s, and probably not very good, but I might. I don't know if they're any good or not. I haven't heard them, so I might just keep going. But yeah, so the Beach Boys, I'm kind of always liked them, always knew who they were, know the hits. But I've got, prior to this, I had I think 4 Beach Boys albums. I got a copy of Pet Sounds back in the early 80s. Around about that same time, I got 2 Capitol albums that were Beach Boys hits, or Greatest Hits Volume 1 and Volume 2 single albums. And I got the Smile box set here a couple of 2 or 3 years ago, whenever that was that came out. And that's about it, really. I mean, I knew I had some of the 45s from, got a lot of my older brother's records when they went off to college and stuff, so had some 45s around, and basically just knew the hits, and that's really it. When my brother had a copy of the album Wild Honey, I thought the cover was really cool. Still have that old album. It's not in very good shape, and actually the album was kind of trashed when I got it, so I don't know that I ever played it, and I don't have the record anymore. I just have the cover. It seems split and all, but just sort of held on to it just because. But so going to be kind of a learning experience for me too, because I'm wondering, outside of the hits that everybody knows, are their album cuts any good, or are they just filler? Whereas I know the albums by the Beatles, the Who, the Kinks, the Rolling Stones, I know that they've got a lot of great album tracks outside of the 45s and the hit singles, and I'm familiar with all that. I'm not familiar, like I said, with Beach Boys albums outside of Pet Sounds and Smile and outside of the hits that everyone knows. So I thought it'd be kind of fun for myself just to go through and see, and maybe not. I mean, I might end up buying these albums and they're not very good outside of the one or two hits, so I might just kind of waste some money. But the funny thing is, when I had the idea to do the Beach Boys, I thought I'd just go, find their old albums and used at Doc's Records or on the internet or wherever. Well, this company, Analog Productions, and so I don't know whether it's Analog Productions or Acoustic Sounds is the actual name of the company, but they re-release a lot of albums on 200 gram, 180 gram vinyl. They release some albums that are 12-inch LP size, but they play at 45 RPM. There's all the Doors albums play at 45 RPM. They have to make it 2 albums to do that because there's not enough to. There's quite a few jazz albums. There's that they've released, some Sam Cooke and stuff. I want to get some of these 45 RPM albums. They're a little pricey. I'm going to get them and get a few in time, but we'd really like to get those Doors ones. Anyway, they release a lot of cool stuff, jazz, rock, and pop. Kind of started off with mainly jazz, and now they've sort of gone out into rock. Dylan albums are on that 45 RPM deal on 12-inch records. So they announced, and Beach Boys on 45 RPM, they're just 33 and a third, but they announced a month or so ago that they are going to release the, do I have it? I guess they might release more in the future, but all of these Beach Boys albums on 200 gram vinyl, and you can get them in mono or stereo, and I guess you can get them in CD and download also. But so I went ahead and bought the first 4 Beach Boys albums, and I will have to get the others as we go along with the review. But this is their first album. I will show you the cover again, and they're in that truck there on the beach. I hope that's showing up on the glare there. That's got a glossy front cover, really nice thick cardboard stock. There's the back cover. It's got a little thing. It's got information about the band here, but it's just here. For those not familiar with the latest craze to invade the sun-drenched Pacific coast of Southern California, here is the definition of surfing. Surfing is a water sport in which the participant stands on a floating slab of wood resembling an ironing board, etc., etc. So it tells you what surfing is. Some pictures of the band. Really nice jacket thickness there. It's kind of funny because the picture, and I don't know that you're going to be able to tell, there's the album cover, the insert, which on the back has the Beach Boys albums that are coming out on this label. They're actually on the Capitol label. It's just this label doing it. There's the cover shot again, but it's an alternate photo. His arms a little higher, and if you look at the compare and contrast, you can see differences. And inside here is just some stuff about who the Beach Boys are, why they decided to re-release their albums, how they did the pressing and the remastering, why they put them out in mono, which I said you can also get them in stereo. I got mono. And if you go to this place's website, they have several videos of showing them making the jackets and pressing the records and stuff. Kind of interesting stuff if you like that technical inside baseball type of stuff. The record itself is like the original, Capitol label, 200 gram vinyl, nice and thick. Played it several times because I've never heard this album before, quite a few times over the last couple of weeks. Sounds really good. So, and like I said, I got their first 4 albums. There's, I think, 8 of them are out so far. They're releasing them in stages, and haven't listened to the other 3 that I got yet, just this one. So, Beach Boys, I think, while they're a singles band, maybe more so than anything else, with the exception of things like Pet Sounds, they kind of that gap between the 50s and the early 60s and the pre-Beatles, pre-Rolling Stones days. They started earlier than either of those bands. Their first 45, for example, was released in October of November of 1961. So you know, a year or so before the Beatles released anything. The Beatles released their first single, Let Me Do, October '62, so almost a year later. The first album, The Beach Boys, comes out in October 1st of 1962, so um, same month as Let Me Do, but they have their album. Beatles' first album comes out March 22nd, 1963 in England, Please Please Me. So they were around a little before, so they're an earlier era, and kind of I guess in a lot of people's minds, I don't. A lot of people give credit to Brian Wilson for being sort of a songwriting or song composing genius, but at the same time, the Beach Boys, especially their earlier stuff, is seen as by a lot of people, I think, myself included, even though I really like it, and is sort of a Golly Gee Whiz, Leave It to Beaver, uh, Wally Cleaver, young and innocent, sort of that feel of the Frankie and Annette Beach movies, stuff like that. Whereas a year or two later, you've got the Beatles coming on, and the Rolling Stones and the Who and stuff with kind of a heavier and more in-depth music sound. And so maybe the Beach Boys kind of got relegated to being, kind of an earlier era sound. Uh, until they caught up a little bit with things like Pet Sounds of Smile, which not to say that the songs weren't popular when the Beatles and the Stones were around. They had #1 hits in '65 and so forth, and they had hits throughout the '60s. But I think most people kind of looked at them as a singles band and not an album band, and that might be correct. Like I said, I have just, with the exception of Pet Sounds, which I know Joe didn't like. I really like that album, but their early albums, maybe they are just a singles band. I will find out, and if you watch this video, you'll find out with me. So, and the funny thing is, the Beach Boys are early on are kind of marketed or seen as this fun in the sun, California, hot rods and surfboards and girls and hot dogs and hamburgers and carefree summer days and Americana, etc., upbeat group. But the flip side of that was the Brian and his brother's dad, Murray Wilson, who ran the band, who served as their manager. They had kind of a terrible upbringing from everything I've read. Brian Wilson can't hear out of one ear because when he was 2 or 3 years old, his dad clocked him in the side of the head so hard that he lost hearing, and the dad was apparently abusive to them and the whole band up through the sig. They finally had enough and kicked him out of the band. As far as not out of the band, kicked him out of management. But and of course we all know Brian Wilson had at 65 or so, he was too nervous or problems where he couldn't tour, so he would stay home and write songs and send the rest of the band out on tour. And then the meltdown after the Smile album that wasn't, and drug abuse and depression for years after that until he finally some semblance of his life back decades later. So it's kind of ironic that they're sold as this all-American happy upbeat band. When you read their story, though, it's pretty dark and sad. And of course, Dennis Wilson died pretty young, and Carl Wilson's gone now too. So, but this is before all that happened. This is back in 1962 when this album came out, and they released their first single, Surfing, like I said, November '61, on an independent label called Candix. That got the attention of, it did okay. It actually went to number 75 in America, which isn't bad for an independent single. It got them some attention. It got them on Capitol Records. They released a single, Surfing Safari, first Capitol single, which actually got to number 14. And so Capitol called for them to make an album, which was released, like I said, October 1st, 1962. The first album went to number 32 on the U.S. charts. Don't think it did anything in England. And that's another thing. The music message board I used to go on a lot. Another one that's pretty much maybe 75% British or English people and 30-25% Americans. In England, they seem to be a lot more popular in a lot of ways than they do in America. I think in America, the Beach Boys are popular for the early fun, Surfin' Safari, California Girls, those early singles. And in England, they tend to be kind of more popular for their post-Pet Sounds, late 60s and 70s albums, is the impression I get. But anyway, off the point there. So the first album comes out, and it gets to number 32 on the U.S. charts, and it stays on the charts for, I wrote that down here, but I don't see it now. It's for like 38 weeks, so not bad for a first album. And the album was probably done in, in a day or two, just like the first Beatles album and so forth. I don't think they spent any time on it. Really young band at the time. They were, you got Mike Love. Well, so you got Brian Wilson, who's the main songwriter, even though he collaborates throughout the Beach Boys' career with other people a lot. But the main songwriter and kind of the musical director, he's the oldest of the three brothers. He would have been about 20 in 1962. You've got Dennis Wilson, Brian's younger brother. He would have been 17 or 18 in 62. He was a drummer in the band. You got Carl, the youngest of the three Wilson brothers, and he would have been like 15 or 16, so really young. And you got Mike Love, who is the Wilson brothers' cousin. Murray Wilson, their dad, his sister was Mike Love's mom. So he would have been about 20 in 62, pretty young. And then you had a guy named Al Jardine, who played on the first single, Surfing. He would have been about 19 or 20. He was a friend of Brian and them, who lived up the street from him. And he played on the first single. Then he decided he wanted to go be a pilot or an astronaut or something. So he left the group, and he doesn't play on the first album, other than that the first single is included on the album. But he doesn't play on the first album, but he does, figures out that being an astronaut's not for him, and he comes back around 1963, or 63 or 4, yeah. And so when he leaves, they get this guy named David Marks in the band, and he plays, what does he play? Well, it doesn't say. I think he plays rhythm guitar. David Marks is all of 14 years old, and that's actually him right there. So, and that's him on the front of the car holding his arm up. Marks is in the band for like the first 3 albums, and then on the 4th album he's in the band. Jardine comes back, so they've got a 6-piece band instead of a 5-piece band. And then Marks leaves the band, but he's still listed as an official member of the band through about 1967, which is a pretty sweet deal because they had a ton of hits. And so I guess he left the band about 63, early 64, but he's still an official member through 67. So I guess all those hits that followed, he probably got a paycheck for doing nothing, which I wish I could figure out a way to do. But Marks went on and formed another band. I don't remember the name of it, and I've never heard any of their stuff, so I have no idea what it's like. He comes back and rejoins the band years later. I'll have to look that up, but I think he rejoins for a short time in like maybe in the 90s or something, or maybe in the 80s, by which time the Beach Boys are pretty much a oldies touring band, even though they're still making new records. And he stays in there for a year or two, and then he leaves again. And then when they had the 50th anniversary tour, an album here in, I think that was 2012, might have been 13, but a year or two ago, That's Why God Made the Radio was 45 off that. He took part in that. So there's the band for you, and they're all pretty young. So like I said, the first album is recorded pretty quickly and rushed out. And it's very, as a debut album, I really like this, but I have a hard time recommending it because I don't know that very many people will. It's very 50-ish and early 60-ish, sort of, like I said, Leave It to Beaver, all-American fun and surf and hot dogs and hamburgers and Patty Duke and Frankie and Annette Beach Blanket Bingo. I love all that sort of stuff. So, you know, it kind of depends if you're into that sort of thing. As a debut, this is definitely nowhere near as good as the Beatles' debut or the Rolling Stones' debut or the Kinks or the Who, which came in '65. So you're talking about 3 years later, and music's changed at such a rapid pace back in the '60s in a way it doesn't do anymore. So can't really count the Who. But I mean, any of those British invasion bands that came out, their debuts were a lot better. The Beatles kind of arrived fully formed, even though there's a sonic leap, in my opinion, from I would Please Please Me album, I'd give it a 10. I would give With the Beatles a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10, but love both of them, but there's kind of a sonic leap from Please Please Me to With the Beatles. But even with Please Please Me, the Beatles still sound a little bit like they're influencing a little early 60-ish and 50-ish, but you can still hear the Beatles in there. They just kind of arrived fully formed somewhere around the time of She Loves You and With the Beatles. The Beach Boys kind of sound like the Beach Boys here, but they're still a work in progress. And like I said, this album was probably recorded in a day or two at the most. And this album sounds a lot more rock and roll and garage rocky than their later songs would, which were more produced and lush in a lot of ways. They sound a lot. I'm not suggesting that this sounds like, you know, punk rock or anything like that, but they sound a lot rawer, more raw, and a lot more work in progress and ramshackle in a good way. But and they also sound kind of goofy and dorky, which I think in a good way. But like I said, others may not agree or like it so much, and they would go on to do much better things. So this is kind of a slight album at best, if I'm to be honest. But let's go real quick through the songs. And out of the 12 songs, Brian Wilson wrote or co-wrote 9 of them, so that's pretty good, pretty impressive for a debut. And you have this guy, Nick Bennett, listed as the producer. From here on out, up until after Smile, Brian Wilson would be listed as the producer. Rumor has it that Brian Wilson actually produced this, and this Bennett guy was just, he was a producer, knew what he was doing. He was just sort of there to sort of help out, but rumor has it that Brian, all of 20 years old, actually did the bulk of the producing. So it's kind of impressive that he writes the majority of the songs, and for a debut album in 1962. And funny thing is, he only sings lead on one of the songs. Most of the songs Mike Love sings lead on. So okay, we start off with Surfin' Safari. There's 3 hits on this album too, which is kind of surprising for a debut, or 3 songs that everybody will know. But Surfin' Safari, number 14, kind of sounds Beach Boyish. No surprise because it's the Beach Boys, but it's probably the most I don't know, advanced is the right word, but the most well produced and best song in that regards on here. It's a great song. I like it. Can't really. It's kind of an early classic. It's got the harmonies and the sound of the Beach Boys that you come to expect in their later singles. Which a lot of this album, their voices sound really good on this album, but the great harmonies and the great Beach Boys vocals are still not yet to arrive on this album on a lot of songs. So Surfin' Safari, you know, everyone knows that. There's not too much else to say about it. County Fair comes up next, and it's goofy. It's a novelty song. It's kind of a gimmick song. The sample lyric, I had to win a stuffed doggy or I'd break her heart in two. Guy goes to a county fair with his girlfriend and she wants him to win hit the sledgehammer on the strength meter thing and win her a stuffed animal. It's got a guy, it's actually Nick Bennett, who does a kind of cheesy Carnival Barker's voice, hurry, hurry, step right up, and it's got a girl, I saw the girl's name, I don't remember it, who plays, win me the stuffed animal, Nikki. Uh, Kind of a gimmicky, silly songs like Big Bad John and Davy Crockett, stuff like that. Um, I like it, but it's very 50ish, very early 60ish sounding. Then we go 10 Little Indians is the next song up, and it's a novelty song again. I like it a little better than County Fair, but it's still kind of a gimmicky, silly novelty song. Funny thing is, the Yardbirds did a song called 10 Little Indians, 1968 or so, 67, 68 or so, which is not the same song, and which is kind of gimmicky and silly for the Yardbirds, but still a pretty great song. Then we get Chug-a-Lug, which is Chug-a-Lug, Chug-a-Lug, I want a lot of root beer, Chug-a-Lug. So yet another silly gimmicky song. I kind of like it, but it's no great masterpiece by any means. Slight song, but a fun song. Little Miss America is, other than Surfin' Safari, which starts the album off on a great opener. Little Miss America is the first really good song on the album. Otherwise, it's lead vocal by Dennis Wilson, and this is a song that Brian didn't write. Herb Albert wrote this song. Uh, just a kind of a nice guy singing about his girlfriend or the girl he's got a crush on. Really good song. I like it a lot. Kind of a ballad. Um, and then 409, She's Real Fine, My 409, closes side one. We all know that song. Yeah, another classic Beach Boys song. Funny thing about that is Surfin' Safari got to 14. 409 was the flip side of a single, and it only got to number 76, which is surprising because that's all over oldies radio in the years since. Side two opens with Surfing, Beach Boys' uh, debut single, and it's a very, very 50s sounding song. It's a doo-wop, kind of sounds like a doo-wop song with high nasally vocals. Very basic, very, I mean, if you think Love Me Do sounds basic, this makes Love Me Do sound advanced, I guess. And yet for all that, it's just simple, direct. I really like the song. It's a lot of fun. It's kind of their debut song there. You get, next up is a song called Heads You Win, Tails I Lose. Sample lyric, every time we have a fight, we flip a coin to see who wins. It's not great song. It's again, it's kind of a 50s sound, but there's a touch of surf music sound in there. It's okay. It's really not okay. It's really not that good. Um, Next up is another cover, Summertime Blues, the famous Eddie Cochran song that, of course, The Who and Blue Cheer would do years down the road. The Beach Boys do it here. It's David Marks takes lead vocals here, and he kind of sings like Eddie Cochran, at least on this song. It's good. He's got a good voice. Doesn't rock along like The Who's live at lead version, of course, but that would be, you know, nearly 10 years later. So, really good song. Really good cover of a really great old 50s song, and one of the highlights of the album. Next up is Cuckoo Clock, which is the only song that Brian Wilson sings lead on here. But it's another gimmicky, you know, song, and it's really just kind of a silly song. Whereas County Fair and 10 Little Indians and even Chug-a-Lug, I guess, are not bad. They're fun songs, even though they're goofy. But Cuckoo Clock is just not much to it. And next up, you got Moondog, DAWG. It is a instrumental. It's really just a kind of driving garage rock instrumental. They're yelping and barking like dogs in the background. It's a surf music sounding thing. It's you know, Surfin' Safari, 409, and Surfin', they're all great songs. I love them, but other than those, I think Moondog might be my favorite song on this album. I really like that. And if you ever the Who's debut album, My Generation, they've got an instrumental song called The Ox, OX, that's just a crazy sort of Mercy beat, British rock, slides into surf music, slides into early version proto heavy metal, slides into punk, slides into surf. Just a great one of my favorite Forgotten Who songs. And Moondog isn't all as powerful as that because the Who were kind of a different animal, but it's a very great piece of surf music and rock and roll instrumental, and love that song. And the last song is called The Shift. It's got a nice intro into the song. It's a vocal song, and the intro is nice, but the rest of the song is just so-so. So there you go, the Beach Boys debut album. Um, they did a lot better, like I said, later on. I like this album though a lot. I don't know if most people, it's going to depend on how much you like that late 50s, early 60s vibe and sound. So, scale of 1 to 10, really and truly, this is probably taking Surfin' Safari 409 and Surfing Off, and just considering the other songs on here, this is probably like a 5 or a 6. But personally, I like it. I'm going to give it a 7.5. Uh, anyway, we'll be back with more Beach Boys.